how grateful I am for having you all be here with us tonight. Have any of you listened to Mindy Todd?
Oh, yeah.
Did anyone listen this morning?
I just heard it was on. I didn't.
I had the great pleasure of getting to know Megan even better this morning, having had the chance to sit with Mindy Todd for an hour, talking about her research on the development or impact of children who had had an incarcerated parent as they've gotten older. Megan's a professor up at BU. She reached out to us. She found us on the website, I'm assuming, and it's a result of a book that she's put together, Clarissa's Disappointment, which she'll tell you more about. But she was looking for an opportunity to share that, and we realized it might be a great training opportunity for all of you to be able to hear some of the stories she's collected, to learn about her experience as a person who had a parent who was incarcerated when she was a child, as well as to learn the stories about people nationally that she's talked with and what that means. And her own insights about what the work we're doing can do to help people who have been in that situation. So I don't want to talk long. Before we switch, for her to be able to get a sense of us, and for you to possibly meet each other, I'm noticing we have some folks that are new volunteers that would like to start with camp this year, as well as people that are returning and some people that are just learning about the camp. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and if you've been at camp, say what your affiliation has been, and if you haven't been to camp, say what's interesting you about the camp that's bringing you here tonight. So, would you mind starting over at this table?
No, not at all. Hi everyone, I'm Cindy Sobey from Forestdale, Mass. And I heard about the camp last year from the Cape Cod Times, read an article in the Cape Cod Times, and I was just too late to read all the deadlines. So I saw it again this year, and here I am. And what's interesting to me is I come from a family of addictions and all that in my childhood, so I love the idea of empowering and children and just having children be free and know that they're loved and all that, and breaking that generational cycle, or at least helping to be a positive spark for them to know that they're loved just the way they are. So that's what interests me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marilyn McMillan. I'm from Falmouth, and this is the first year that I'm volunteering for the camp. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to share the beauty of the Cape and be intergenerational and having a good time.
This is my friend from Queens. She's just a tad old. My name is Maureen Grandmont, and I worked with the kids on photography last year, and they did an amazing job, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful camp. Lots of fun.
Okay, I'm Dick Galbraith. I'm so far a 3-time winner and looking forward to going back this summer. Been staying overnight with them. Got interested when it first started. Early in my career, I taught in a reform school and worked in the criminal justice system. And I've spent enough time with kids that I know this program's really needed.
I'm Len Solomon, and I'm here because my wife has had a very positive experience there, and she's browbeated me enough. My background is I am a school psychologist and administrator, and I've worked with adjudicated youth, and the only camp that I ever worked at, I got fired from because the camp director's niece and I were attracted to one another. So this is my chance to redeem myself.
Hi, I'm Lynn Solomon, and I was involved in the first 2 camps. I had to miss it last year because we were away, and I really enjoy working with the kids, especially the swimming. I'm a good swimmer, and I like to do that, but really just doing anything with them. And I'm really looking forward to this next camp.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Heaney, and I'm here because of the computer cord. I had to find a cord, and I work over at the thrift shop. And then I remember Bernice has told me a lot about this project, and I think I might be a jack of all trades but the master of none, so I probably can do something.
I'm Bernice Winthrop. I worked at the beginning of the camp in Maryland in 2006, and when I came up here, I was one of the founding mothers, I guess you have to call us. I don't know what Ross would be, but anyhow, so I was one of the beginners up here. I've been to camp 3 times, missed 1 year, and I will probably miss this summer because my son and his wife did not plan their pregnancy well enough.
Hi, my name is Leslie Petrovich. I recently came from Hungary. I live with Leonard and Linda. I'm very glad they opened their home to me. What interests me in the program is its similarity to my work in Hungary. Part of my work involved organization development, and I'm very happy to have brought over what I call the best of the West. A lot of untasteful things have come over the people, but this is one of the most important. They had no idea of mentor programs, what a mentor was, and this was a major, major breakthrough. You should be happy to know even Putin values it. There is a big brothers, big sisters in Moscow.
Hi, I'm Hillary Green. I've been on the board the whole time. I wouldn't call myself a founding mother, but because I've never been to camp and I don't have any children. So, but I do enjoy this work. I usually do the overnights and get to know the kids, and really looking forward to this year. Also, I'm your fundraising committee, so in case you want to give money, come see me.
I'm Maggie Rice. I live down the street. I worked the first 2 years, and my heart is with this work in this camp. We have wonderful children, and they're being given such a wonderful gift.
I'm Robin Trainer. I've been involved since the beginning with the camp. I've spent most of my life with kids anyway, so this is wonderful for me. And I currently work in the courts for people coming for restraining orders for domestic violence, so you do still see some of that as well.
I'm Kristen Harper. I'm the minister of the Unitarian Church of Barnstable. And my interest is actually outside the camp, but how we can do something monthly to help. That's where my interest lies.
Hello there, I'm Cynthia Hickey. I'm a new volunteer. I have 5 kids, 10 grandchildren. Taught school for a short time. My professional career was in hospice, where I was the director of volunteers. So I'm interested in helping with the volunteer program in some ways. I'm also interested in being a mentor a try this summer.
I'm Lisa Barr. This will be my 2nd year with the program, and my interest is sparked by my work. I work as an attorney for our state's child support enforcement agency, so about 20% of our population is actively incarcerated.
So just as a brief kind of connect the dots and share of our history, Amazing Grace started when a number of people approached the pastor at St. Mary's Episcopal Church, Libby Gibson, about doing something around prison ministry. And as they got together, Hillary and Bernice, Carol Bolstead, and Moss Anderson were the 4, started the conversation. And Bernice brought experience with a camp similar to Amazing Grace from Maryland. Ross brought experience from Vermont. They're camps that were started by a woman named Jackie Means, who was the first regularly ordained Episcopal woman priest in the United States. There were a group of 11 that were irregularly ordained the year previous, but Jackie was official and had happened when it was legal for women to be ordained in the Episcopal Church. When she started her work as a priest, they asked her, so what would you like to do? And they hadn't thought much about how to involve women in priestly ministry. She got involved in prison ministry and started, the first camp was in New Mexico, and I think at last count there's about 29 of them that are in existence around the United States. They started with a similar base in terms of working with 7 to 11-year-olds, but how they each have expressed themselves is very different based on the context that they're in. We're blessed to have a partnership with the South Shore YMCA, Camp Burgess, who has been very generous. They give us a scholarship for each of our kids, as well as staff during the week to do the specialties. So they're taking care of the lifeguards, they're taking care of the high ropes, they're taking care of all of the major elements. We need to have volunteers who will be mentors, who will stay with the kids, help them to have fun, and make sure they have fun safely. So that's where you all come in, and we're very grateful for your time and energy in doing that. We've had some evolution over the 4 years that we've been doing this. This will be our 4th summer. Last year, we were able for the first time to have our kids who age out of the program join the sister camp across the pond. It's Camp Hayward is the YMCA's, during the summer, it's their girls' camp, and Burgess is their boys' camp. During the week that we're there, it's co-ed for us at Burgess, and they have a 1-week co-ed experience for kids all around the Cape. Our kids are able to go and be integrated within that camp experience. And the joy that I have with that is that by being a part of that program, they are eligible to become counselors in training. And my deep hope is that we will have a few of our kids go through the training and come back and be mentors with you as they can continue in their progression as a part of the program. The other thing that I'm excited about, and Kristen, this is where you come in, we were able to receive a grant from the Sears Foundation for $10,000. That gave us $5,000 for each of 2 years to do year-round programming. Last year we were able to do some wonderful activities with the kids. We went to a field that was growing pumpkins, and the kids could pick pumpkins, and we painted them and had apple cider together in October. In November, we went back to camp and we made flyers, little gliders, and visited with the goats and the chickens and made sure that they were all safe during the fall period. We went to Edaville and rode on the rides and saw all of the lights in preparation for the Christmas holidays. In February, we went to the Cape Cotter and had a swimming outing in the middle of the cold weather of the year here. And in March, we worked with the Hyannis Arts District and had artists, a potter and some bead workers and a painter in a rotation where the kids and their families could come. What I've learned by doing that. Oh, I'm sorry, I even forgot that one.
And the African drums, right?
We had the African drums and we had ice skating at the Hyannis rink. So there were a number of fun activities. What's been great is that we've gotten to know some of the siblings as well as the caregivers. And not only did we get to know them, but they've been getting to know each other. And I've seen relationships between foster parents growing and different grandmothers who have children growing. And it's been nice to be able to see how they are supporting each other as well as we're working with them.
I'm doing camp recruitment this year, and I just want to add to that. When Hillary set us up with the alternative gift fair in Falmouth, the people across the little aisle from us were grandparents raising grandchildren. And we have a number, they have been they're getting kids to us. We're getting a number of kids that heard from it through their organization.
So as you're learning, most of what's happening is networking. This has been growing because of the generosity of folks like yourselves with prayer, with financial resources, and with time to help us to be able to offer it. And we'd appreciate it if you can continue to share our story. We are recording tonight's program in part for the folks who aren't able to come, as well as in the hope of putting together a video that Michael's going to be able to help us with that will record also stories from the kids and some of the activities that they're a part of during August, so that we can more broadly share what we're doing with others and be able to tell that story back to the fund givers that have given us resources to be able to put to effect, so that they can see what we see when we're with the kids, is how much of a positive impact this is for them. I'm happy to answer more questions. This is a training opportunity for our volunteers as well as a public forum. So I don't want to talk too much more, but we'll be around afterward to be able to answer questions if anyone has anything you want to learn more about. And I'd like to turn the rest over to Megan so she can share with us some of the research that she's had.
Thanks so much. Are we good? I can also use that microphone.
Let me check really quick. Say something?
Hold it down.
Maybe we should be good.
Okay.
Actually.
No, this should be good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and I'm so thrilled to meet Julie today. We've been corresponding via email. Actually, a colleague of mine at Boston University, I've been there for 20 years, a colleague of mine who's also a minister in an Episcopal church in Fall River. She's the one who gave me the pamphlet on Amazing Grace. Am I doing anything wrong?
Michael's adjusting.
Okay. She's the one who gave me the literature for Amazing Grace. So today when Julie and I were on the radio program, I was so moved and just profoundly moved by what you're all doing, because this is a really great program. And it's when you work with children of incarcerated parents, and when you do research on children of incarcerated parents and parental incarceration, as I do, one of the things you find out is that there are very few programs that make a real difference. This kind of thing that you're doing, this kind of one-on-one mentoring and campership, that makes a real difference. Can you hear okay, or should I?
Yes.
Okay. This makes a real difference, and so I'm really thrilled that you're all here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on children of incarcerated parents in the United States, and if you get bored or if you want different kind of information, just raise your hand. I'm used to freshmen and sophomores, so I don't get offended easily. Okay, so I write, one of the things I write on, and then I'll tell you a little bit about my story too, but one of the things I write on is incarceration and families in the United States, specifically how incarceration affects children. And one thing, if you don't already know it, I always tell my students that the United States is #1 in incarceration. With about a little less than 5% of the world population, we nevertheless incarcerate about 25% of the world's prisoners. So we have a lot of incarcerated people in the United States. If you look at a map of incarceration in the United States, you'll see that from about 1925, when we first started keeping statistics, until about 1980, we have dips, but we're pretty status quo until about 1980. And then we had this huge leap in the number of people who've been incarcerated. In about 2010, 2012, we started to level off a little bit, and now we're probably about here. This is 2014, we're probably about here right now. And largely, the reasons for this are threefold. One, the so-called war on drugs. Two, 3 strikes or you're out policy. And 3, the increased number of women who went to prison for drug-related activity, whether it was activity they were involved in or whether it was activity their partner was involved in. Since 1980, we've actually started sending more people to prison for drug-related activity, and we started to lock them up longer. So you can see here that the number of people in prison and jails for drug offense and what kind of increase we've had. State prisons, federal prisons, and jails. And remember that jails are usually where people go for crimes where they're serving about a year or less, or they're waiting to come to trial. So a lot of people ask me what the distinction is between jails and prison. Jails are usually more short-term, usually. Okay. Other numbers continue to tell the story. People of color make up approximately 30% of the U.S. population, but account for 60% of those who are incarcerated. I said 70 million today. I better write the Mindy Todd show. 7 million people, Americans, are currently on probation or parole in the United States. And one of the things that makes us think about is even when we're talking about kids who don't currently have a parent incarcerated, they might have a parent who's on parole, or they might have a parent who's in a pre-parole position. So that we have 7 million people in the United States who are currently on probation or parole. That's a lot of people who are involved with the criminal justice system. 5.8 million Americans cannot vote because they have a felony conviction. Some states you can't vote when you're in prison, other states you can't even vote when you get out of prison. So most people, and this is the statistic I usually repeat for people, most people in parents are prison. Most people in prison are parents. So about 3/4 of people in prison right now are parents. Most children of incarcerated people, most children of incarcerated parents, well now I'll give you a review of the children, U.S. children of incarcerated parents. We have right now, our latest estimate, 2.7 million children in the United States have an incarcerated parent. But the estimates vary between 1 in 12, 1 in 14, and some even say 1 in 24. But really the number I use is 1 in 14 children in the United States has a parent in prison or jail. And I talk a lot to teachers, and I usually say what that means for teachers is that you're bound to have at least one student in your class who either is a child of an incarcerated parent or has had an incarcerated parent. But 1 in 4 children are black, 1 in 10 are Latino, and 1 in 11 are white. Most people in prison are parents, 75% of women and 65% of men. And we can talk a lot about why about up to half of all the children of incarcerated parents never visit their parents in prison or jail. Up to half. And then those who do visit don't usually visit for very often. And there are a lot of reasons for this. A lot of times people have talked about the distance from the people's homes to the prison, and that's a big issue. Women's prison, because there are so many fewer women in prison, women can be up to 400 miles from their last known address. So that can be up to 400 miles from their children. Men usually are up to about 100 miles away from their children. Poor children are 3 times more likely to experience the incarceration of a resident parent. 72% of mothers lived with their children before incarceration, or at least one child. About 36% of fathers lived with their children before incarceration, and about 42% of men had some sort of involvement with their children before they went to prison. Whether it was visiting, they visited their children, they lived with them, or they gave money to them. From 1990 to 2007, the number of children in prisoners rose 77% for fathers and 131% for mothers. So our biggest, as you can see there, our biggest leap has been with mothers. Okay. And then I'll get through all the research quickly. Research and practice tell us some of what we need to know. Children of incarcerated parents have an increased risk of poverty, housing and food insecurity, mental health concerns, criminal justice involvement, academic difficulties, feelings of stigma, and stressed families. Now, having said that, I'm always very careful to point out there is no direct link between parental incarceration and every one of those outcomes. So I always hesitate to say to someone that just because a parent is incarcerated, it doesn't mean that children will necessarily be incarcerated. In fact, really the statistics are that children, only about 30% of children of incarcerated parents will someday become involved in the criminal justice system. That number raises a little bit when you just ferret out for boys, but it's still about 30%. There's no direct link between parental incarceration and feelings of stigma, for example, and yet we know that children who have incarcerated parents do feel stigmatized. So it's very difficult to tease out what matters and what is. Often children with incarcerated parents have a constellation of factors. They're living in poverty, Many of them, they're living in poverty, they have an incarcerated parent, there might be abuse in the, alcohol or drug abuse in the family. It's kind of a constellation of factors. But I always say to people, and I said it on the Mindy Todd show today, every child who has an incarcerated parent has an incarcerated parent, but no two children of incarcerated parents are exactly the same. So every situation is different depending on the family circumstance. We'll talk a little bit about that. Nevertheless, it's helpful to know that research shows all of these things, so we can kind of keep that in our mind. Not to stigmatize children, not to assume that that will happen, but to think, that might be an issue, so maybe I should address it. Parental incarceration is now considered an adverse childhood experience or a traumatic experience in a person's life occurring before the age of 18 that is remembered or can be remembered as an adult. And that's what's really important. You can say to people, and I've written a lot about this in my own personal case, it was often hard for me to figure out what exactly was the relationship between my father's incarceration and some of the things I dealt with as a child, and we'll talk more about that. It can be difficult to tease that out, but it's there, it's in the mix. Most of what we know about the academic access and needs of children is not from direct study and is related to behavior. This is one of my focus points because I'm a teacher, that we've had a lot of small-scale studies on children in school, but really these studies have asked parents, caregivers, and teachers how children are doing. And a lot of what they've gotten is feedback on the children's behavior, less so than their academic success or not. So that's really what I'm trying to ferret out. What's the difference there? One of the things that we have found out is that children of incarcerated parents, in the most recent longer-term study, we found that children of incarcerated parents may have slight cognitive differences, but we don't know if this is due to social and emotional health and learning rather than the incarceration. So where does one thing end and the other thing begin? We're not sure about that. There's also been some talk about the fact that some of the children who might have it worse or have more academic obstacles to overcome, strangely enough, are children like I would have been. That is, children who previously came from good, stable homes where I probably would have had increased opportunities. But the incarceration kind of shut some of that off a little bit. We'll talk about it. Most studies focus on behavior and not academic outcomes. Most studies ask for self, family, or teacher reports. And it seems clear that children, unfortunately, are stigmatized by teachers and classmates in the classroom from the literature we hear. In fact, some teachers have reported that they don't think you should tell a teacher when a parent is incarcerated because they're afraid that their peers, their other peer teachers, will stigmatize them. From the research I've done with children, that doesn't seem to be the case. You might get a child who says that he or she felt stigmatized, but then you'll get another child who says he or she was really encouraged by a teacher. So that's what I mean by it varies. I don't think we can make any one-to-one assumptions about that. So what can we do? And some of this will affect, will resonate with you as volunteers, and some of it will not, but maybe you could just file it in the back of your mind. I teach students, or teachers, when I talk to teachers, I use this acronym ABC, teach students. I say, first of all, acknowledge the possibility that if there are about 1 in 14 children who have an incarcerated parent, you probably have a child in your classroom, or in your school, or in your hallway who has an incarcerated parent. And I think for all of this, all of us as volunteers, as human beings, as people in our society, we have to acknowledge the fact that some of the children we encounter have incarcerated parents. You're going to encounter them in the camp, but you would encounter them anyway, just by virtue of the numbers of children with incarcerated parents. I say books can help. I write on parental incarceration, mostly academic books, but I also just recently wrote a children's book. It's called Clarissa's Disappointment, and it was published last year. And I did it because I really felt like I have to do the academic work. I like it, it's important. I like being employed, you know what I mean? I have to continue to publish. But children of incarcerated parents, I really wanted to read children. So I wrote a children's book about a young girl who, whose father's just come home from prison, and he's going through what we call the re-entry period. That is, he's re-entering home and society after 5 years in prison. And she deals with all the difficulties that come along with that. Disappointment is that things aren't always as easy as she thought they would be. But through the book, she learns, through her teacher and through a community poet, she learns to be a writer and to write about her feelings. And she has some interactions with friends who help her when she's bullied in school. So I feel like books can help. I always say to people, have a book in your classroom, in your school, in your office if you're a counselor. Just have a book that might relate to a child's experience so they can pick it up and read it. Conference creatively, I say to teachers, we have some prisons, very few, but some prisons are reaching out to do parent-teacher conferences from the prisons. Very few prisoners have access to email, but more and more are beginning to do some kind of electronic visitation for people who can't get to the prisons. So think about how, I always say, think about how you can conference creatively with a child. Probably not so much for the campers you're dealing with, but for the teachers I work with, I say, if you're doing an English language arts unit on writing a letter, you might want to ask the children to think about who they might want to write a letter to. For counselors, I say ask, A-S-K, ascertain that the child is safe, support caregivers, and know what you don't know. And this support caregivers might be interesting to you if you come across some of the camper caregivers. I've written about how hard it is for caregivers. Oftentimes, when a mother is incarcerated, it's often the maternal grandparents who work with the child. When a father is incarcerated, usually it's the mother or the other custodial parent, but not always. So there are a lot of caregivers here, and they could really use our support too. And I always say, know what you don't know. Ask children. At the camp you're at, I love what Julie said, you don't make a big deal of it. It's not like you say to the kids the first day there, now tell me how you feel about this. They don't want that, they just want to play. But there might be an opportunity, it might come up at some point, and there might be an opportunity to say, hey, I know someone you might want to talk to, I know a book you might want to read, I can sort of maybe have you talk to someone if you'd like. And I always say that to people, know what you don't know. Don't assume you know what the child needs, but know that you're going to ask. So there's a select bibliography here. So the only other thing I really wanted to say is I started this project with a lot of things, but the Parental Incarceration, Personal Accounts and Developmental Impact is a book I co-edited with my colleague, Denise Johnson. So Denise Johnson is a pediatrician. She's academic, and she's run for 35 years an organization in California that works with prisoners' families. She's incredibly well respected. She was also incarcerated herself when she was in her early 20s, and she had 2 children. And so she's really well known in the field. We got together and decided to write this book because no one had ever asked adult children what they thought. And so we collected about 40 essays from adult children across the U.S., and they reflected on how they thought their parents' incarceration had affected them. And it's amazing the number of them who can remember 1 or 2 adults who made the difference for them. And I think that's really important for all of you to think about. So I'm going to stop sort of lecturing and see if people have questions, if they want to ask me anything. They don't have to. Nothing's required.
If you have thoughts or questions?
Or for you. Yeah.
You talked about a number of factors that the kids may be experiencing. They seem to overlap with the same experiences children have if they have an absent parent.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever tried to tease that apart?
Mm-hmm.
Parental absence generally versus
incarceration. That's a good question. There has been some research on that. I think that if I had to break it down, I think that what people think is that parental incarceration it depends on the parental absence can be this way too, but a lot of times it's so sudden, children don't even know it's coming, you know? It's not like there's any time to prepare for it. I mentioned today in our radio talk that one of the young women in the essays that I collected, she talked about the fact that she came home from high school one day and her apartment had been totally trashed. It was clear the police had been there and that there were needles there and that her mother had been taken to prison for drug use. And so she said, in the essay she report that she thought, well, sooner or later I'm going to have to leave this apartment. So I just cleaned up the apartment and I left that night. She must have had to have been traumatized to do that. But she said, I left that night and I went to sleep in a park near school because I didn't want to be late for class the next day. You know, so this idea that a lot of times children have no idea. Sometimes that happens with absence too. I think that with parental incarceration, there are a lot of similar feelings that there are to parental absence. But I think that the circumstances can be different in that the parent can often be in and out of a child's life. You know, sometimes parents go to prison for a couple of years, then they come out, they try to sort of pick up where they left off. It's not always that easy to do. So there's a lot of discontinuity and a lot of fear about what will happen next. But I think you're quite right. A lot of the same feelings about having an absent parent have to be there.
I'll just say that we have a number of kids that are on our list that have parents that were in jail, came out of jail, and then broke parole,
right,
and are back in jail. So there's this in and out kind of thing that happens. And a number of our kids don't know before they come to camp that their parent is in jail. So we tell the caregiver to make sure they know that because it's going to come up at camp. And we don't want to be the ones, you know, you don't want to break that when the kid's away from home.
No, I agree. And we talked a lot about that today, the reasons. There are still a lot of families that don't tell kids when a parent is away in prison or jail. They say things like, your father's working out of town. Or in our book we tell the story about a nun actually who ran one of the most well-known women's programs for women's prisons in New York, and she took a young woman to visit her mother in prison, and she said, and the young girl said to the nun, Sister so-and-so, could you please not tell my grandmother? She thinks my mother's away in college. You know, I mean, so parents tell all kinds of things because sometimes they don't want to hurt the child's feelings. Sometimes they think they're sparing the child. Sometimes it happens quickly, and the children, they don't have a chance to tell the children. The other thing that you touch on that's really important, most people who go back to prison, despite... Is that me? Is that because we're too close? Most people who, despite what people think and despite the rhetoric of criminality, most people go back to prison for parole violations. It doesn't mean they haven't done anything wrong. I'm not taking a side on that, but it's a parole violation. Most often, doesn't mean always, but most often, it's not for a new criminal offense, it's for a parole violation.
Yes.
Sorry, I think we got too close to each other.
Totally fine. Everything's handled.
Any other questions?
Again, I've never had any experience, I don't know if it's not enough, experience with children or with camp. And the very first summer I was there, we had some downtime and the kids were just playing. And we had given them flashlights. And this still stands out in my mind so clearly. Because, and they started shining in each other's eyes going, have you been drinking? And reliving police coming in and taking their parent away. So when you're talking about the suddenness and whatever, and I was thinking, why? And everybody started joining in. These were 7 and 11-year-olds, and I thought, wow, that's really something that even though my parents drank, I never saw that, you know, and the sense that it seemed so normal to them. I mean, the good side of it was they were kids who understood.
Right.
Nobody went, what are you talking about? They were all like, oh yeah, and they were all flashing their flashlights and reenacting things. And So in a way, it's sudden, but I guess some of them have seen like their parents being taken away.
I mean, it's also that a lot of people, and I don't know the statistics on this, so I'm not going to say, but, you know, there are a lot of people who have criminal justice or involved in criminal justice activities before they go to prison or jail. So that's why I say that I usually tell when people ask me if they should have their children, or caregivers ask me if they have their children visit the incarcerated parent, I say, well, what's the relationship like? You know, what's the relationship like between the child and the parent? Because sometimes there's been criminal activity beforehand, or substance abuse, or other things that have made difficult situations. It doesn't mean the parent and the children don't love each other, but there's often been tense situations. Sometimes it's not the first time and the only time. The other thing about that is statistics say, and this is difficult to gather, we can only gather this from police stations, and not all police stations keep records on this, but statistics say about 20 to 22% of children see their parents get arrested. Those who do often have very difficult and traumatic experience. Some of them, they not only see their parent getting arrested, they see their parent being handcuffed, they see their parent being pushed around. A certain number of them see a weapon being pulled. So that's extremely traumatic. But I think it's also traumatic that some of this stuff is what they see on TV. You know, I mean, they might see something on TV, flashlights and other things like that. Like, how many really sort of good depictions do we have of prison or jail? I mean, I mentioned that when I was 10, my father was, who was a lawyer, was incarcerated. He was given a 2 to 5 year sentence. I never visited him because my parents didn't want us to visit, my siblings or I. And I think that was perfectly fine. They made the best decision they could have. Now that I know better, I sort of know that statistically, I think it does help if children, if the situation is right, I think it helps for children to visit or have some contact. We wrote letters and things like that when I started with this. Oh, I never went to visit my father in prison, so all I had were these horrible images from TV and movies. And I wrote about, one time I wrote an essay that was published somewhere about the fact that I had these 2 images in my mind as a child. That one, I would see my father in like this, you know, cell with just a mattress and a light bulb, and he was wearing stripes. And then in the other, he was like out in this idyllic yard, maybe sipping iced tea and writing me a nice letter, because all I had were my child's imagination. You know, and so I think it's really careful, it's really important. I'm not suggesting that you talk to children about that. I'm just suggesting if they want to talk to it, that you get in touch with someone that they can talk to about it. Any questions?
Can I ask you about the camp? How do caregivers and campers find out about it, and generally where are they from?
Bernice is putting together the camper recruitment packet, and what we will do is give the mentors some basic information about each of the children. We don't have information about the incarceration, we don't share that. It's not necessary for the kind of camp that we're offering. We have found out from the kids talking, there have been a lot of situations where drug and alcohol abuse have caused problems or have been the problem. We have had a story of at least one of our families where the father was abusing the children and the mother with domestic violence got away. So as Megan is telling us, there's a range in terms of whether or not they have loving feelings about the parent who's incarcerated being incarcerated.
I'll just follow up on that, saying this is the first year that the application for camp asks where the parent is, or not, it doesn't have to be a parent, by the way. It could be a brother or a sister or just a family member, grandmother, where the family member is incarcerated, and whether they're incarcerated on parole, on probation. And this is the first year we've asked that, and this is also the first year that we've asked, how did you find out about us? Because we're at a point now where we want to see where our, where we're disseminating to.
So have the kids generally been
Like from the Cape or from Massachusetts or from where?
All the Cape and South Shore is what the invite to come.
Yes.
We haven't turned anyone away that's within a reasonable distance if they can get to
If they can
camp.
get it, yeah.
The other thing we also accept, we have one child, who both of his parents have died now. No, wait, his father, he was living with the father died. He has gone to live with his mother. And his mother has a half-sibling whose father is not in prison. But because those two kids are living in the same household, that other sibling will be able to come. Because how do you tell a 7-year-old, he gets to go, but you don't? You can't tell, you can't explain that to a kid.
Right.
So all of the kids in the household get to come, whether or not.
Whether or not they're actually
Yeah.
related to them.
As far as what goes on in camp, I want to emphasize that know what we don't know bullet and say, and it's not our job to find out. What we really want to be doing in camp is giving them a chance to be successful and build good memories that are going to carry forward. So that's the round at camp. We're not doing anything Freudian or digging. It's the looking through that they are appreciated and that they're expected to be able to be successful.
And that they can be a kid.
Yeah.
They can be a kid.
Yeah.
They can go to camp and be a kid, and that's a great gift you're giving.
One of the questions that a lot of mentors have asked over the years is, do we have specialists to help the kids if something happens? And as we do preparation, the day before camp opens on August 19th, we'll have a training on Saturday from 1 till about 6, and then again probably Sunday morning before the kids arrive. And during that time, we'll be getting to know each other well. As you get to know each other, you'll realize the gifts that each of us bring. And it's amazing what we need appears when we need it. We have counselors, we have school counselors, we have school teachers, we have people who have sociology backgrounds and criminal justice system experience. And you will find that what you need is there when you need it. And if nobody else knows, I'm available, knowing who each of you are, to be able to point you and connect you when we see a child who needs a particular kind of support or a timeout or some other kind of help. So we will be getting to know each other more, and we'll be helping each other to help the kids have that fun.
Hello? Can you hear me? I really apologize. My hearing aid isn't working.
I'm sorry.
And I feel like I missed half the...
I can send it to you.
Pardon me?
I can send the PowerPoint to you if you have an online.
We will have a recording as well that we'll make available.
That is, what I want to say is, it may not entirely be directly related to the person, the situation. But I did want to emphasize enormous value in a group like this, enormous value in the intergenerational bonding or outreach. A very dear friend of mine from Manhattan worked as a psychoanalyst in Bronx, in the inner city, and he just finished a book not long ago. I think it's through Routledge, The Analyst in the Ghetto. And he did the research along with me on Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, where in a situation like this, where there's enormous chaos in the family, one parent may be an addict, another may be missing, and whatever the chaos is, the child may withdraw and may mirror this chaos, But what happens is that as a mentor comes into the picture, if we can see this withdrawal inside as a hiding of the inner child or a hiding of the true self, when a mentor comes into the picture, this true self comes out, and it's like a life vest or something that the kids naturally want to be good. They want to be healthy, and this provides what Neil, my friend, discovered over a long time, 2 years, which is what Big Brothers Big Sisters does. And the predictability, it's amazing, you know. It's raining, Mom, and Uncle Joe came. Or look, unbelievable, Mom, snowing, and we're still gonna go out to McDonald's or something. It's a remarkably healing thing in terms of building trust, and this true self comes out. The research shows that if the facilitative contact is long term, 2 years, once a week, predictable, 40% of the kids do not start drinking. 60% do not take drugs. And 90% finish high school. Now, to me, that's a remarkably interesting and important finding. So there's value in old people. So that's what I'm trying to say. And enormous value in America giving back with the volunteerism. So,
I agree.
and remember, it's valued by Putin. We should talk more about that.
I'm going to echo what he says and talk a little bit about the child that I mentored in Maryland. Daquan came to camp when he was going into 4th grade for the first time. I had a conversation with him about that I would teach him to swim. He did learn to swim that first year. Was pleased with punch with himself. I continued with him over the next couple of years, and then when he outgrew the camp in Maryland, I sponsored him to go into the regular diocesan camp down in Maryland, because that's how the camp worked. At one point I said to him, "What's the hardest thing in school for you?" And he said that reading was his hardest thing. And I said, if you improve your reading, your life is going to be 100% better. So he spent that year, he told me, the next summer, he spent that year improving his reading and was accepted into a magnet school for middle school. Then went to a magnet high school and ended up going to college on a full scholarship. So the camp does work. And I think that echoes what you were saying, that this consistency and the belief that if I say it will happen, it will happen.
The key word is expectation. You had faith in him and expected something, and he produced. That's a miracle of God, I think.
Yeah, and I've often written that I feel for this boy the same way I feel for my own 3 sons.
Right.
This is one thing that I've struggled with in terms of asking from each of you to be a part of the program, the consistency factor. We realized after the first year, when we accepted probably 50-some volunteers, that we had a lot of wonderful people who cared greatly about the kids, but a lot of them were only there for a couple of hours on one day. And having so many people changing throughout the week was very disconcerting for the kids and havoc for those of us trying to manage the cats in the room. So we've tried to be more selective in recruiting our volunteers, and we've been asking for folks to please give us at least 2 or 3 days at the same time so that we can pair you with a couple of kids that you'll work with every time you come. And that way they'll have the consistency of getting to know you, and you'll have deeper understanding of them so we can have those relationships. We also would love and encourage you to be a part of the year-round activities so that they will see you, not just during the summer and August at camp, but also in November and in January, and you can hear the stories about what's going on, and you can help us to understand what kind of impact, if any, I'm assuming there is because I've been witnessing it, but what kind of impact, if any, you witness, and what that means for you and for them as that relationship grows. And I think you're right, Les. It is in that consistent, unconditional love, unconditional regard, positive regard, that the kids are experiencing something that they might not know before. I'm not saying that their families aren't loving and caring, but having that consistency is what can give them some stability to see other options as their life happens. And that's what we hope to provide. So again, we are very grateful for the time that you commit, and we encourage you to be generous with that time throughout the year as well. If anyone wants to learn about board opportunities, if anyone wants to learn about subcommittees, if anyone knows any camp nurses, we do still have some room for other roles within the camp structure as well. We really have expanded to be the Amazing Grace of Cape Cod program, not just camp, and it's only happened because of how people have generously come forward to help that happen. I've gone back on a little bit more of camp stuff. Is there any other questions for Megan? Can we give her a huge round of applause? Thank you. I heard from the little bird that she's considering the possibility of joining us for some of the summer. So we would love it if you are able to come back, and certainly to get to know some of the kids that we've experienced. As I said, I'm happy to stick around and talk with anyone. If there's anyone who would like to meet with coffee to talk more about things in particular, I've been setting up time with folks. I'm hoping we're going to have a Ghost Stories with the Barnstable Unitarian Universalist Church in October. And we invite you to think about what other organizations you're a part of, churches, schools, civic organizations that we can either present to or that we might get to partner to be able to do some of the year-round activities so we can share the options going across the year.
I'm also going to add, the other thing that St. David's, this church does, is every child will go home with a lap quilt. So if you are a quilter, please come see me, because I have stuff that you can do. Not that I'm doing the quilts, but I have my minions who are doing the quilts.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.